I think that discussing softwares is not something unrelated to the glossary, because the whole point of the glossary is to achieve at least a minimum level of consistency. But what I have been thinking is, who is going to check that this consistency has been achieved? So are we going to suppose that just because we have a list, everyone is going to follow it? I think that would be too naive. And actually the editors, who are the ones who are going to compare the volumes, they are going to use this software. So please allow me to ask very simple questions that, because of my ignorance. Suppose we have, and I'm asking that to both Venerable Mali and Professor Dr. Maniratana. Suppose I have a volume of the Digha Nikaya, and I'm going to start with volume 1 of Digha Nikaya of the Syamarata edition. Now I have the PDF of the actual book, so the scanned version of the book in Thai script. We also have a TXT file, a text file, very simple file. So, and then I would like to use one of these softwares in my translation, so that my translation will be more consistent and it will help me. What is the first step? Do I need to import the original text to the software and then translate within the software, or I'm translating separately? How do we go about it? What are the steps for a translator to use this tool?
Actually, it's very technical. You see, I try to give you information. So actually, you see, when we translate, every translator has to install, or because it can be used standalone or via the internet, like the workspace together. But in this case, because we work together, it means that everyone should work on workspace, and everything that everyone put in will be there, and everything, like according to the functions, the program will arrange for you. Some programs are very famous, usually EU interpretation and translation. You see, they have to translate, you see, more than 1 million pages a year. So they use some kind of this program, and I think the quality, so it's already certified by some kind of word translation quality. So I think there shouldn't be any problem. If you want more information, maybe I can find more information to start with. But usually when I have done it, so we just, how to say, we can add glossary or whatever, not just only glossary. So that's why I'm thinking that, you see, it's very good, you see, when you have like 1,000, because if no one wants it, I may ask permission to use it, because I think I am going to build a corpus, a religious corpus, you see. It's very valuable, and some kind of tattoo, you see, they can generate terminology, you see, into a big volume, big data in order to use for some other languages as well. So this is like the first thing. And then we put all the information into its archive, you see, not just only glossary, anything. So no matter how big volume is, you can arrange 100% matching, 80% or whatever, keep it and use it just only 100% matching, and then later we agree. For example, you agree that just only 3 terms, you will consider these 3 terms as term-based, right? And then when everyone confront or come across with this kind of term, it will pop up automatically. For example, like Prasut, you see, someone told me that in Prasut 25 volumes or whatever, there are probably almost 50% repetition. So no time to waste, to see, because then the program will help us to pop everything, and then you make decision, and it's good for editorial board, because they don't have to waste time in order to do manually, you see. They can check across the program, and especially you see spelling, grammar, all kinds of things. They check across. Actually, I already presented, but the moderator told me that you don't have time, no time anymore. So I rushed it. So my tongue twisted, so I cannot talk or explain. I'm sorry.
May I ask a few questions, Doctor? So did I understand it correctly that every translator will have to work in the interface, through the interface of that software? It's not that we are going to sit down in our room, open the Word or the Pages software, and then write our translation. We have to log in and work within the software, and all our information, all our translation will be in that software. Is that correct?
I know that it's very hard for everyone to start using it, but in order to get every information, every action, every phase information, then you can have big volume of corpus. But if not possible for everyone to be part of the workspace together, right? Then maybe just only a key person to put it into to integrate onto the platform. But it's very good if anyone can give everything in there. So then everyone can see everyone sentence or paragraph. So we will learn to know what sentence or what statement, because it pop-ups all the time. Then you can make decision. But for the term-based, right, the 300 thing, you cannot change anything. You have to accept this. But for some other thing, you can exchange. And then if we can give, like for example, there are 3 translators, and if it's not for term-based, because we have no choice for term-based, right? But for 3 persons, like Alex, me, and the most vulnerable, Romali, you see, give translation in there. But finally, we decide that his version is good, so we keep it for everyone. It will pop up. Actually, I would like to show it to you, but not today. Maybe later, then we can start from the beginning of how to use it until that. It's very popular. Almost professional translator use it. See, there are some tools. I couldn't remember the name, but we can take a look. But for Bilala, you see, Bilala is how to say. I don't want to make any comments, but the other tools, they are up to date and has more functions. But it depends, you see. But anyway, I think, you see, because it's million words, we cannot do manually, and it will take time, too much time for us.
I think, unfortunately, we don't have enough time to go through the whole process. My questions are more like from the point of view of the...
Maybe you can send your information, and then I can add
Then
something, and then we can talk
something.
and exchange. Then you can see what happens to your 300 terms, right? Or for example,
that's my worry, actually, being honest, and I'm going to play the devil's advocate here. So what I would need is a very strong argument that shows that using these softwares is faster and more efficient than working the traditional way. So that's what we need, really, because we already have a traditional way. That's what we usually do. So we need but there is something like in automatic translation that is very wrong. Like, for instance, we will probably include I'm just saying translation, not edition, just in the translation. Suppose we include the word atta in the glossary. Obviously, when we are talking about Buddhism, everyone says atta is the self or whatever, and the anatta. But the atta is actually a pronoun, and it appears 1,000 times simply as oneself. To kill oneself, to do something to oneself. So we cannot translate that mechanically. We have to think. So at the end of the day, when we find the word atta, we cannot just press a button. We have to think. We have to look at the context and then translate. What I understand is that due to the specific nature of Buddhist texts, not just Pali, but other sutta texts, especially early texts, they work in a certain way. They have certain patterns. There are repetitions of entire passages, and that's why I believe the Vilara has been designed specifically for such type of text. And what I understand is the advantage is that it will save a lot of time. As a translator, my experience is that if you don't use such software, revising every time you are translating the same paragraph is a kind of a nightmare. It's difficult. You have to find a way to, if possible, to use technology for that, and it's much faster. But here's my question. Actually, I don't worry about that. I'm sure we'll find a tool to find. My question is, and that's something that I mentioned yesterday, does that mean that at the end, for instance, when we find there are plenty of these passages, suppose the jhanas, the description of the jhanas, this is a passage that repeats across the Sutta Pitaka, repeats many times. Does that mean that we are going to translate always in exactly the same way? So once we have this software, the editors will see, well, I just realized that here we have not just one volume, we have 5 volumes, they all have several times this passage, so I'm going to unify, it's all going to be translated in the same way. Is that, so I'm asking this to everyone, this is an open discussion. Do you think that's the way we have to go? Because I think that I disagree with that. Because if that's the way we have to go, we don't need 30 translators. Because it's basically we are going to decide on one translation, or maybe there is a group of translators who decide on one way to translate that passage, and then we apply it throughout. And if we do that in one of these passages, there are so many that at the end, maybe it's better to have a team of 5 translators for the entire Sutta Pitaka, at least the 4 main Nikayas, and let them translate the whole thing. This is a question. I'm playing the devil's advocate here, but I think that Reverend Ramali is waiting for his.
I just first of all I wanted to reply to maybe what you said before, just very briefly about the foundation for creating a platform, because the scriptures that are used on Sutta Central is not the Siyamarata Nikaya, so it is actually different. So it has to be basically the whole thing has to be re-input into Bilara for this particular project. That in itself is going to be a major undertaking, and you're going to need the people with the right kind of knowledge, understanding to do that. That is the first kind of hurdle that we have to pass. When it comes to the other point that you're mentioning now, that should the jhana formulas be the same every time or not? I personally don't think that's the point of it. For me, the point of this kind of software is to give other people's translations. And what you will often find is that another person has already thought about this in great detail and come up with a very nice solution to something which we may not think of. We can only think so much. We can only undertake so many difficult translation tasks and come up with really good solutions. So if someone else already has come up with a really nice solution, we can just take it straight out and we can use that solution for ourselves. So in the jhana formula, if you find that the other person has come up with something that is better than you, which sometimes will happen, they say, wow, this is really cool, okay, so input it. Then, of course, it saves you a lot of work, and it actually reduces the workload. But if you have your own favorite translation, which is also going to be very often the case, because I know how it is with me, that's exactly how it is, then you can put in your own translation instead and override the other one. And then other people will then have the benefit of looking at your translation in the future. And in this way, we can actually, it's almost like we build up a kind of the best part of every translator somehow gets integrated into the translation ultimately if we work in this way. Potentially, that's the way it can work.
So, I don't know, because you see, yesterday and today, or even before, you see, we talk a lot about consistency, and then we have like almost 100,000 pages to do. How we can make sure that from the first page until the last page, we have something together instead of translate in different ways. So I think that's why we have to have glossary, all kinds of things. We need to know how to cope with consistency, not just only consistency, you see, register, style, all kinds of things. It has to be the same level, even if different translators translate, right? For example, maybe I prefer style of romantic novel, so I put something like this, but the other translator may be focused on academic translation, all kinds of things. But if we have, or even Vilara, you see, Vilara, it means that we have to request every translator to use it, right? Otherwise, then something else. and other cat tool as well. People have to use it, enjoy it, and share information in order to make it, how to say, consistency, not just the meaning, you see, style, all kinds of writing, register, so many things, but don't know, you see. But I think the meeting, the other committees may help to make decision. But for me, I prefer to use machine to help, not just only to do manually, because if my translation is already finished, the burden will fall to editorial board. How come they check it off?
Would anyone else like to say something about this? How do you feel about using such softwares as translators? Would you
or they prefer to not to use it? So I don't know.
I had another question actually for you both regarding, I think Venerable Brahmali already replied to that question, but still the question is, in our case, the specific problem is not just going to be within one volume, it's going to be across volumes. So are these softwares useful when we are going to compare several volumes, or what is going to be is that the software feeds on what has been input before, so it will recognize, for instance, a passage and will kind of bring it back and compare it with the passage that we have in your volume, something like this?
Okay, it has how to say, the important function is translation memory. So it means that anything that you put in or add in, interpret in, then you can use across spectrum, across volume, across anything that you put in. You can draw it. You don't have to draw it. It will pop up automatically. 100% you can, how to say, set or determine which statement is 100% matching, 80%, 30%, whatever. Anything in there. For example, like I gave presentation that if for Bhagava, you see someone may use the blessed one, someone may use the gracious one, someone may use the enlightened, exalted, whatever, or Lord Buddha. Then the agreed term base, you see, when we translate, separate or individual translator, the agreed term will pop up under green line, under green menu, that this is the one that we agree. So it will replace, for example, I type the gracious one, and then we can get the blessed one automatically, and across volume, across spectrum, or something. So it's save time. I think it's save time.
I think Yerasi wanted to say something. That's so Sele.
Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon. I have just little experience with translating with Belara to Lithuanian, and as I see it, this tool is good for oneself to keep consistent his own translations. You can choose and see how others translate the same text in other languages, which you want, but not like searching the same segments in other volumes of other translators. But within your own work, whatever you have done, it proposes you. And you're free to choose to follow or not to follow. You can search, you can change. So it's useful to keep one's own consistency. But I don't know if it would be useful to keep consistency across, like comparing to others' work. And is it our aim in the end?
This is Belara, right? You talk about Belara.
That's
I think Venerable Brahmali would like to say something about Belara.
I think it depends on the settings that you have. I think you can set it in such a way that it actually compares across everything, or within a certain corpus or whatever. That's just a matter of the background settings essentially. So I think that should be no problem. But I would recommend that if you are seriously interested in Bilara, I would recommend to have a conversation, maybe for Alex to have a conversation with Bante Sujato, because he knows all the ins and outs of this software. I think that would probably be very productive if you want to make a decision about this.
Because you see, I'm sorry, it's centralized database, so it means that not just only you, because it's not standalone. It's share information. So it means that anyone within the group can access to this information. That's why they provide term base for everyone to use the agreed term base. Maybe I don't know much about Bilara, but the other cat tool the more updated, you see. So because we work in the same network, we share. Every time that we log in, you see, we share information within the group, right? So you can share within the group. But if you add group, then you can share more because there how to say big space for archive. I don't mean just the glossary. Some other thing like explanation, commentaries, anything that you can put in. So the best way is that maybe we can have some kind of a short demo later. Then we can compare between Bilara and some other cat tools. I think you see, if we can make use of IT or AI or whatever, then it can save our time. But what brand, I don't have preference. But the most important thing is that it has to have enough functions for us.
If may I ask a question again to everyone? If we were to use such softwares, do we need to start using them right from the beginning, or so what do you think? Because I understand that if we are going to use them, we should better learn how to use them, because that's how we have to start our translation. So if after this conference, after this workshop, we reach some decisions, and then we have to start translating, I understand that if we are to use this software, then we have to use that from, let's say, from tomorrow or from next month when we start translating. I also understand that some of our translators have already started their work without using the software. So my questions are actually aimed at a practical decision. What are we going to do? How do you feel about this, being translators? Let's forget about the editorial part, but you are translators here, so how do you feel about that? Or you are joining the project as members of the international team or the Thai team? I would like to hear more voices about this, not from the technical point of view, but as users. I think Mr. Shaw would like to say something.
Thank you, Alesh. Yes, I was also wondering about the practicality, and I'm also bearing in mind what has been already said about the budget, and there is a certain time pressure to get this done. If we decide that first of all that the whole of the Thai edition has to be put into the software, that's a major undertaking. The whole thing could be put back 6 months before we even start. I mean, so I'm not sure that it's even helpful to consider this if the practicalities make it unrealistic. I really don't know that we're in a position to do that. On the other hand, as Sister Piedasi has pointed out, it may well be helpful for people if people wish to use that individually, use the software individually for their own help, then that's clearly a beneficial thing, and that doesn't affect the general timetable at all. If people are already familiar with the software and know how to do it, then that's obviously very helpful. But trying to introduce it at this stage across the board as something that everybody would have to do, I think is a little problematic, not least because many people will have come on board expecting to do it, to do the translation work in a certain way, and suddenly to be asked to get everybody on board to change tack at this stage, I would just wonder whether that's a practical proposition, and will certainly lead to major delays, which I'm not sure is consistent with the budgetary program to which we're committed.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw.
I'm sorry.
Oh, yes.
Sorry. No, it has to be consensus or not. actually, I think we have to ask other groups as well that they want to use it or not. But if the majority doesn't want to use it, then we can keep the traditional way. 1,100 years ago, we can keep it. And maybe because, I get involved at the project at the beginning, including the budget from the government. So I already proposed to the government at the beginning that we may want to use some kind of software in order to make it consistency, keep it to be under a certain level of standards and quality. So I think the budget doesn't, you see, concern much about it, but it depends upon our decision.
Yeah, I think Mr. Shaw, what he meant by the budget is that, as far as I have understood, we are going with the Thai fiscal year. That means we have 3 batches of budget. So the budget is given to the project in 3 different parts.
But we don't have to use it. We don't have to use it if we don't want to use it. But I have some other option, you see, because I think maybe my group, I don't know, but some of my group, maybe we would want to try on new technology in order to make it differentiated from the other versions. So maybe some kind of pilot project, you see, maybe just 3 or 4 books, you see, we will do it on some kind of CAD tool, and then we'll see the result. But it depends if the other groups don't want to do it, it's okay. But I think the government may be kind enough to allow us to have some kind of pilot project to launch Tipitaka 2,000 years ago on modern technology, maybe.
I think that's a wonderful project, but it's a different project, and that is the problem. So here, in theory, we should reach decisions on our project. But from my point of view, there are still very important aspects of the project that are not decided. Like, for instance, before I mentioned, are we going to translate all these passages that are formulae or they are pericopes, like the description of the jhanas? And to my understanding, some of us, we believe that the translator will have a certain level of freedom. But some of us are saying the opposite, that say, no, there is no freedom in those cases. If there is a formula, we all translate the same. That's why we need to find a way to check. So then there is another point. Even if, yeah, 1 second, please. Even if we don't use the software right from the beginning, then the question remains, when the manuscripts will reach the editors, how are they going to check the volumes? Because what I understand is that eventually, sooner or later, someone will be given the task to input everything into a software. And that's very time consuming. And we're going to find a similar situation like with the glossary. That we all want a glossary, but nobody wants to do it. And that is the reality. Nobody has time to do it. I didn't have time to do it. So in the end, all the work went to Mr. Patrick. And he did his best. But actually, he is not even a translator. He's supporting us. But we talk a lot, but the point is, who is going to do it? And that is my concern, because that's the practical thing. And if we don't use the software at the beginning, it will have to be used later. But sooner or later, someone will have to do the input. And this is not translating the Tipitaka. This is doing very boring work with a computer that has nothing to do with Pali. So my question is, what do you think about that? Do you have any idea, any practical idea on how to solve the problem of our project? Yes, Mr. Shaw.
So I think this may come back to the question that was raised yesterday about the question of consistency and at what level we seek to apply consistency. If we're applying consistency at the level of individual volumes, and we stressed yesterday the importance of individual translators being consistent within their own work, then if that's the level at which we're working, it then becomes relatively straightforward for the editors to work within each volume to check consistency within that, and they're not having to check a much wider panorama beyond. And so I think it depends again on what we mean by consistency, at what level we're looking to apply that. But that would certainly be the most practical way to overcome, in my view, the problem that you've identified.
So suppose we have a very low expectation regarding consistency. The lowest would be, in my understanding, that we simply expect every translator to use these 100 terms. Let's say that these 100 terms will be used across the collection, nothing more than that. Still, who's going to check that, and how? So are we just going to go the usual way, like probably the editors will know those 100 words already by heart, and they will just read the books, and whenever they spot something difficult, they will correct it? That would be I think that would be a practical way. It's not 100% sure, but we are not using any technology. But since we have been discussing the technological possibility, the technological aid, that's why I just wanted to discuss this point, because that we already discussed that in our first workshop, if I remember correctly. And at that point, we agreed that we would use
May I know, like, who are the editors, and are they already appointed, and are they present in this meeting?
I have the list of the editorial team somewhere. I don't know the list by heart. I am there. Like it or not.
So then I think those editorial boards will decide whatever, how you are going to handle that kind of thing. I think rather than discussing over or something, first how to check, no? So then I think as it seems that I think for example in my case I have never used before this kind of software, but I need to learn if I have to use. And so of course whatever I do, one can actually upload to the program if it is available, and so that will not be a problem. I don't think it is a big problem, but I think the editorial board can decide how to check, like if it is sort of if you like, for example, to have it on that platform, so then maybe whatever we produce as translators, and whatever the way, so then it could be uploaded, and then the checking could be done. So I'm not sure as to why we need to discuss in detail at this forum on this issue now.
Yeah, I understand your point, Professor, because this, in theory, this doesn't affect everyone.
Yeah.
But for instance, the decision on the consistency and the vocabulary, that is an editorial decision. So we are already discussing the edition.
Yeah.
We are not discussing.
Yeah. Okay. So the other editors are present here. All the editors are present here. So can we ask them also to speak on this issue?
I think Mr. Shaw is also one of the editors, and he has already given his opinion. I don't know if Dr. Borno is still around. Then I will follow your yes, Venerable Mali.
I just wanted to comment just very briefly on what Professor Samaratna was saying about the translating and uploading it to the software afterwards. I cannot speak for the other software, but for the Bilara software, it's not actually all that trivial to do that. It may sound trivial, but the point is that the software is already segmented, the text will already be segmented. Then you have to match your translation to those segments, segment by segment, put it in there. And so that depends, how easy that is really depends on how you have translated it, whether the segments of your translation in English matches the segments in the Pali in terms of sentence structure, that sort of thing. And then you have to actually upload it sentence by sentence. So it's actually a major undertaking to do that. And I had a lot of my Vinaya translation beforehand, and I had it 4 people helping me to actually upload it to Bilara to make it all kind of fit together. So it was it's quite it's not as trivial as it may sound, just to be clear about it.
As yesterday when I was advocating for freedom or complete freedom to the translators, although it may sound a little bit extreme, my point was simply to keep it practical and let translators start their work. And then we'll see what we do at the editorial stage. But at the same time, I think this has to be discussed because the editorial decisions will affect how translators translate. And I need to share with you that these editorial decisions have not been taken. And it's like it's also paticca samuppada. It's like it's not just the translators then will send it to editor, but there will be feedback. And it is just the fact that we haven't decided that yet. And I'm aware that that is not something that you have to decide, but it will affect your work. So if you can share your points of view, that will be helpful. For instance, what I understand is that applying using the software is not something that everyone will like to do. So we're probably not going to use it at the level of translation. Venerable Brahmali would like to say something.
Yeah, regarding the idea of feedback, that there is in development right now of Bilara a function to provide feedback. Yeah. So when the editors go through a particular text, they can actually provide the feedback within Bilara itself, which makes it very easy. Then you can work across borders, you can work across the world and provide feedback directly. And then it's up to the translator then to accept the feedback or not, and then carry on like that. I can understand that people are maybe a little bit reluctant to use this kind of software because it may sound very complicated, but I can say at least my use is actually the Bilara software is incredibly easy to use. It's just a matter of clicking on a particular field and doing the translation, moving on to the next field, to the next segment, and just carry on like that. That's my experience with it. Maybe Venerable Piedas, if you would like to comment on your experience with Bilara.
Yeah, sure, Bante. It's really easy. You just plug and play. I had one nun actually. I connected with one nun to explain me, but actually it's just plug and play. It's really just open. You know how to open the browser. You know how to click, and once you start, you get options what you have done already before, and it's very easy. There is no issues with that. You don't need special training, definitely. Or maybe 5 or 10 minutes training.
And it's the same as in the other tech tool, you see, because if it's not user-friendly, no one will use it. But it depends upon the other.
Am I right in understanding that one of the problems now is not just the software, but it also would be the segmentation of the text? That would be some work that would have to be done in preparation for translating the Siamarata edition. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. I don't know how long that will take, and it really depends on, I suppose, what kind of team of people we have working with us in these kind of things. And I would suggest that you speak with the person who has created the whole thing, which is Venerable Sujata. If you have a chat with him, you get much better idea what can be done within what kind of time frame. But there are different ways of overcoming this. One way of doing it would be to use the segmented text as it is now, and then someone could compare the Siamarata text and compare it to the text that is actually in Bilara, and we can point out there's going to be only a tiny small number of differences of any significance. We point out those differences and then check those and see if those are acceptable, with the or retranslate if necessary in those cases.
May I ask Professor Premasiri, what do you think about this, Professor? We can't hear you, Professor. I think you will have to unmute. Thank you.
Yeah, I joined the discussion to learn, and I believe what you were discussing was about consistency in terminology, or is that the main issue?
Actually, the issue, Professor, is whether translators and editors would be happy to use softwares and computer programs to do the work, the translating work, and the editorial work, the editing after the translation is done. How would you feel about this, Professor? With this, because this is a problem to some translators, and we need to hear different opinions.
Yeah, I think if they are familiarized with the technology involved, it would be all right. But I think in my case, maybe it's I'm not very familiar with that kind of technology. So I think there has to be some kind of instruction given for people to use that technology. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor. Well, what I see is that at this point it's very difficult to reach a conclusion, and we probably are not going to decide anything in a rush here. But I still believe that it was good discussing this issue, because that's something that sooner or later we'll have to decide. Maybe there can be another editorial meeting later on, and we can share that with all. We can share the results of the meeting with all translators. But I still see it as a sticking point, as a point that it needs to be solved as soon as possible, because that's crucial for the structure of the project. It is a translation, so it's a text that we are going to write, and we need to know whether that's going to be on paper, on a computer, or which program, and so on. But basically, the main topic or the main subject for this session was the glossary. Now, during the break, so I have shared the Excel file, this chat box, but I cannot do that. Maybe I need to get the permission again. I'm going to share the screen. Okay. Can everyone see the screen right now?
Yeah.
Good. So here there are many colors, but never mind about that. They're just the blue ones are the ones that I was already selecting for the final list. So this here we have 300 words approximately. This number is not the correct one. The number on the left. I don't know if is it big enough. Hope it's big enough so that everyone can read. So in some cases, like for instance at that, I think this is a must, right? So we see a different translation proposed, like self or self. There's always self somewhere, self. So I think the translation is not the big problem here. It's just agreeing on selecting such a word. This list, as it has been said several times, is based on Bhikkhu Bodhi's glossary, I believe in the Samyutta Nikaya translation. But during the break, Dr. Gornal suggested that perhaps we can start from a shorter list, not Bhikkhu Bodhi's list. So a list that is already short, that is, I think it's Jnanatiloka's dictionary. Buddhist Dictionary, Manual of Buddhist Terms and Doctrines of Jnanatiloka. Are you aware of this publication? Does anyone use that? You can also share the screen.
Yes, actually,
too many files open. So there is this publication.
Yeah, I'm quite familiar with it. I have put that into my own language or translation into Sing.
So one possibility would be taking the Pali terms from this dictionary. If you haven't seen how it looks like, then it's a general dictionary, so there are the terms in English, like abandonment, contemplation, etc. Then it gives the equivalent. But then there are Pali terms, like aboka, sitanga. That I think that would make a very good example of a term that we don't really need. Ababa, gamana, that is also probably a term that we don't need. But in this dictionary, which is shorter, seems, then we would find words that we all could agree that they are worth keeping in a glossary. Now, to me, I'm a bit doubtful about how to go about this. If we start discussing now which words go into the glossary or not, we don't have really time to finish this, even in a whole day of work. So, would it be okay to give some time to everyone to go through it, or what do you think? Would you prefer that someone, again, drafts a list of 100 terms and then going through it? I would like to hear suggestions. There's always this the practical problem, as I said before, that who is going to do that? Who has the time to go through it and select and have enough time to think which ones deserve being in the list of 100 or 200 and which one's done. If there is any volunteer, I will be most happy to transfer the duty, of course. If not, then we'll find a way. But I think we have to find a practical solution for this, because otherwise we will discuss about the glossary for many years. Yes, Venerable Brahmali.
Please tell me off if I talk too much, because but I also like to, when I make these kind of decisions, I also like to go back to the sutta and ask myself, what would the Buddha himself have recommended in this kind of situation? What is his kind of core terminology that he would want to use? And if we look at how the Buddha explains the Dhamma in the sutta, there are certain things that he says specifically is core to the Dhamma. Yeah? And for example, if you go to the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, Digha Nikaya 16, in there he explains that my Dhamma is the 37 Bodhipatya Dhammas. Yeah, that's my Dhamma. So if you start off with the 37 Bodhipatya Dhammas as a foundation for terminological foundation, then we're actually following the Buddha very, very closely. Another starting point that might be, like in the Mahahatipadopama Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 28, we know that Venerable Sariputta says that for the Four Noble Truths, all other good teachings fit within the Four Noble Truths. So the Four Noble Truths is another kind of additional starting point that we can start with. Of course, also in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, they form the foundation for the whole Sutta. So if you start off with something like the 37 Bodhipatya Dhammas and the Four Noble Truths, and then you can unpack those a little bit, I think that may be a very good way to start a list. And then you will find that within that there are still terms that are missing, like atta, for example, is not really found in that particular case. So then you will have to add things to that list. But I think that might be a way of creating a basic starting point for a list, possibly. So I don't know if that will work, but that is certainly a possibility. So if you unpack those and you look at the terminology used within those 37 of those four, then you already have maybe 50, 60 words already right away.
Sorry, I muted. I was talking alone. I completely agree with that. Actually, that's the better way of saying what I was also trying to point to this basic list, but this is perfect, I think, to begin with. I don't think that today we can agree on the exact terms, but maybe if you would suggest a specific list or specific set of words, not the words themselves, there are many sets or lists. So I would agree that we have to include this 37, because in many suttas they appear as the compendium of the Dhamma. Obviously the Four Noble Truths, which include the Eightfold Path. Shall we include as a set of words the epithets of the Buddha, like Bhagava, Tathagata, Sugato, Dasavalo? Shall we include that? I think there have been many suggestions. Buddha. Any other list or set of words that you would include in the glossary?
I think it can come like a phone noble persons, not four, but noble person.
How are the 8?
Yeah.
8.
Okay. The 4 couples.
Yeah. Like two
Would you also include the words for the planes of existence, the kind of cosmological, the word for the type of heaven, hell, no? Professor Samarate, we can't hear you.
Yeah, sorry, if you go to the Abhidhamma list, like those pillars, like those Chetasika, for example, some of the common ones, you can include them.
Okay. So now let's suppose that the Abhidhamma team will also add some more to the Abhidhamma glossary. But what do you think for the general glossary?
Like for example, like I think some of them may come under what we already discussed, but like Tanha, the pillars, it is Asava, for example, Asava, and Sangyojana.
Yes. Then maybe
do we keep term like Nibbana untranslated, or do we use any English term to translate Nibbana?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of, if we unpack the Four Noble Truths, then words like Tanha and Nibbana is already included in the Four Noble Truths. So it's already there.
There is a Venerable Chandamuka is proposing names of like common nouns. I agree, Bhante, that words like Deva and Satta, the problem I have is with the etc. This etc. could, I don't know how long is the etc. here. So would we include names of animals, names of different types of gods? We say that probably different types of gods, like Deva, yes, maybe, but not the type of Deva. Of course, we have Deva, Devata, Deva Buddha, which are very close, but sometimes mean the same, sometimes they don't. So I think some of us would leave them aside, but they are important terms, so I don't know, like a Brahmana, like there's a Brahmin or Brahmana. I would keep them outside, but Venerable Chandamuka, if you would have to describe like a class of words, like a group of words, what would that be? Like you would have to, just for the list, to say like Four Noble Truths, like specific list that can help us, to kind of contain this kind of expanding list.
Yeah, I think like in the Four Noble Truths, like Dukkha, for example, when you unpack, you find the 5 aggregates, but whether we want to highlight it again or and again in the dependent horizon, this two-factor formula, those terminologies there.
Like for instance,
Avidya, Sankara, I think some of them are coming, of course. Whether there is something missing, I'm not sure. That's why.
Shall we say for the sake of clarity,
that formula, yes,
Nidana?
Nidana, Parisampada. So whether you want to unpack that also.
Okay. Any other?
And when, for example, when you are unpacking asavas, you may find karma, bhavas,
Right.
These are coming in. So whether we want to go that detail, so we can.
Venerable Chandamuka is saying existences like Kamavachara, Rupavachara, Arupavachara. This is, I think this was included in the planes of existence, so in this kind of cosmological map.
Yeah.
Sometimes I have used these systems in glossaries, but I'm not too sure if maybe I can have a question mark, like
Alex, may I suggest something?
Yes, Bhante.
For the comprehensive list of the Dhamma, I suggest that we look into two sutta, comprehensive terms of the Dhamma. One is Sankhiti Sutta,
Yeah.
and the other one is the Suttara Sutta. All the groups, the Dhamma from 1 to 10 or more than 10 appear there. If we agree on the terms of the Dhamma there, I think it be helpful not only for the Suttanta Pitaka but also for Abhidhamma. But that is in these two sutras.
Yes.
Sankhita.
I totally agree, Bhante. And I think that's more or less what Venerable Brahmali was trying to point out when he proposed the 37 Bodhipakkhiya, right? More or less.
But it will be more comprehensive, you know, if you look into the groups of the Dhamma there in the sutra, two sutras. It's written by Sariputta. It's very similar to Abhidhamma, but it appears in the Suttanta Pitaka. I think the whole list of the Dhamma, whatever there appear there, but you can check that whether everything included there or not, and then you can say that the translation that we provide for the Dhamma appear in the two sutra are okay or not.
That is, I think, a very good starting point. Then there are words that are very common in the Nikayas like Paripajako or Papacha, these kind of terms. I don't know exactly how to put them in one. Maybe I don't know how to say that, this terminology about the ascetic culture or something like this. Papacha, Samana, that would make sense. Words related to ascetic culture. Or do you have any better suggestion like that? I'm not so sure you would like to include them, actually. Maybe some of you will prefer to leave it out of the list. And we haven't agreed on Nibbana. I'm not so sure if anyone would like to say something about whether to translate Nibbana or not. Yes, Brahmali.
I have so many opinions, but I think my personal feeling is that it's very, very important to translate the word like Nibbana, because Nibbana is something that people, they see the word and they input whatever they feel that Nibbana should mean, they put that into it. If you don't translate it, it doesn't mean anything to an English-speaking mind. It's just a word. Whereas in ancient India, if an ancient Indian heard the word Nibbana, they would straight away have a feeling for it, because it actually had a meaning in the Pali language, in the Sanskrit language, in Indian vernacular. It would have a certain meaning. So I think it is important that we actually express that meaning, so that someone in the present day has the same feeling for the text as the ancient Indians did when they heard this sutra spoken. So for that reason, I would prefer to translate this with extinguishment, in the same way that Vikibodhi translates it in the Anguttara Nikaya.
Couldn't you use something like appeasement? Appeasement?
No, appeasement will work for samatha, I think.
Samatha, you could use
What is appeasement?
something like calming or
Like when we say sabba sankhara samatha, but I think extinguishment is much better because it's extinguishment of fire, right? So,
yeah, that can give the impression that it's something like annihilation.
No, I think in the context, I think people will get used to it because if you just read only one sutta, maybe maybe people may misunderstand. But since we are putting it in a proper context, I think it will not be that. But yeah, I also prefer extinguishment.
Great. So we don't need to reach a conclusion now, and I think we already said before that we will accept more than one possible translation sometimes for a certain term, as long as it is correct. I always remember one anecdote that is told in some chronicles in Myanmar about the story in the 15th century that Venerable Aryavamsa was teaching, and then so he asked someone if he had any criticism. He said no, that because every word that you say, at least it touches, it's like throwing a stone on the wall. As long as you touch the wall, then that's right, you hit the target. So I think here also, as long as the words are correct, I think we can accept more than one, and then here every translator will have margin for decision. I wonder if the possibility for not translating Nibbana would also be there, but maybe that's something we can decide once we have the list with Nibbana included. And now I can't think of any other like really important thing that we are missing.
One thing that we are missing, Alex, is the tilakana, I think.
Yeah, I was wondering about that, but because it's let's just make it very clear and explicit. So I don't know. Shall we take this as a point of departure? It doesn't mean it's just the beginning. It's not the end at all. I can definitely draft this list. I will do it on the basis of what we have done so far. We haven't wasted our time. I know that many of our contributors here have gone through the entire list. So I really thank you all very much for this, for spending time with this, for the discussion. So this is not wasted work. I'm going to use all this material in order to draft this list, this shorter list. And if there is anyone who would like to add something to this issue, then the floor is open.
Yes, it is not connected with this issue, but how about whether we want to use capital or lowercase for some of these terms, like for example, Nibbana, if we decide to use the Nibbana term, whether we need to use the capital form or just lowercase for N?
Yes, Professor, I think this is again another crucial editorial decision that has not been taken, and so I personally cannot answer. So this is our situation now, where we are pending certain editorial decisions, because as translators we should have some guidelines. I don't know exactly how to go about that, but we will have to decide on this, like capital or not capital. The amount of footnotes, like yesterday in the lecture by Professor Maria Heim, she began the lecture actually with her point of departure in editorial terms, which is what the multi-classical library told her. Like, this is how we do it. This is the type of translation that we want. Then if you sign the contract, then that's what you are going to do, and the rest is your decision. So in that type of selection, then they try to keep the footnotes to a minimum. In our case, that is also something that I've heard different opinions. Professor Premasiri, for instance, is in favor of explaining things that are unclear, even if it's translated. Sometimes the terms are complex and they require footnotes, because sometimes we say, okay, we are going to translate this in English in a way that people understand. But even if, this is my opinion, even if we translate Nibbana as extinguishment, I'm not so sure that when the usual English person hears extinguishment, they understand, oh, you mean the extinction of the kilesas, because they haven't heard of that maybe. So then we would need a footnote. But if we do that again, we can run into very big apparatus of footnotes. That is another editorial decision that we haven't taken. I guess there is a degree of freedom for every translator here. If you feel that you have to add more footnotes, that is to some extent connected with this idea of having a glossary type of dictionary for the reader, so that some of these key terms are explained not just with a one-to-one translation, but also a little bit of explanation for the key terms. But I don't know what you think about that, about the footnotes, whether to use footnotes or endnotes or just a kind of short dictionary at the end. Any opinions? Or if there are no opinions, we can leave it for later. But these are, I think, important issues.
Professor, let me
yes, please.
Let me share my idea. I think how about the Kamma? Kamma is one of central teaching of Buddhism, and in supporting the idea of Venerable Shaman, I think we should check from Anguttara Nikaya, the numerical discourses that divided into 11 groups, from Ekaka to Ekatasaka, group of 1 to group of 11. I think we can add the group of Dhamma from Anguttara Nikaya. Thank you.
So, are you suggesting, Bhante, that all the lists of the Anguttara Nikaya should be added to the glossary?
Yes, I think in Anguttara Nikaya there are many group of Dhamma, from group of 1 to group of 11. For example, like the Tilakkhana and Noble Eightfold Path, Ariya Satya. All of the group, I think there is in the Anguttara Nikaya.
Yeah, I think they are mostly coming in the Dasuttara Sutta and Samyutta Sutta also.
So, for the sake of brevity, we will take the Sangiti and the Suttara Sutantaka as summaries of the Anguttara, if I can use that expression. And because the idea here is to keep everything short. Because if we go into much detail, then we will end up translating the Tipitaka. That's the other project. So, would that provisional list be okay to everyone? Okay. I'm going to share this document now. So I have shared the doc file, the Word file.
May I also say something on, I think earlier I pointed out on the gender issue, whether we need to consider, why I'm asking is that, like the term Devata. Okay, so Devata term is appearing, we take it as a deity, and of course there is also Deva Putra, but then we can say, okay, male connected, but particularly when it comes to Devata, so we cannot really repeat deity again and again in the text. So we have to use either he or she. So what should we do in section?
Very good question. I don't have a final answer. I think when we translate, like for instance, Deva as God or simply Deva, some people leave it as Deva, because they say that it's not like the Christian God, but of course the Christians, they were using a pre-Christian word, so we can use the opposite argument and say that actually the word Deus in Latin, it doesn't refer to the monotheistic God, it refers to the polytheistic gods, the Devas, like the Devas in the Pali Pitaka. So So there are many views here, and I'm not so sure if anyone would have a solution for this. I would translate Deva as God, and then maybe deity, Devata as deity, but I don't have a strong opinion.
So the Devata is of course a very neutral term, so the deity.
Right.
So it can be male or female. But of course when you say Deva Buddha, the commentary says it's referring to the Purisa basically. So the male. So that's the problem. That kind of problem. Maybe there may be some others. I haven't still come across that kind of thing. So in future, so if there are certain things that whether we have, because of course we can guess, but commentary always maybe male deity or something like that. Whether we need to follow the commentary.
I wouldn't think that it matters very much, because even a term like say Panya, it is declined as a feminine noun. So Devata being feminine doesn't raise a great problem here.
Yeah, I am considering like when it comes to like a pronoun, he this kind of decision making.
This reminds me that yesterday also in the guest lecture there were a few issues that are relevant to our project, issues that we have discussed, but I have the feeling that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that sometimes out of politeness we don't want to, we say okay and everyone says okay, but we haven't made a decision. One of the, and there are 2 points on which we haven't really reached a final decision or a very clear decision. Maybe we can reach that decision, but one is, are we going to follow the interpretation of the commentary or not? It's very simple, yes or no. I think maybe I'm too kind of ekantavadi, like absolutist, but I think sometimes it's very clear. You follow the commentary or you are not following the commentary. So are we allowed to not to follow the commentary? My understanding is that we are allowed, but I would like to make it clear that in some cases we are allowed not to follow the commentary. Is that the case? Do you agree? Not agree?
We could take a pragmatic approach regarding this, not follow a strict guideline as such, but follow the middle way. Where we think that the commentary is useful, we can make use of it, and where we think that the commentary is actually there is a problem of the time difference and change of meaning occurring by the commentarial period, then we can ignore the commentarial period.
Yes, I agree with Professor. Where there is any necessary that we probably use the commentary. In case of translating like Dhammapada, there is one stanza, Matarang Pitaram Hantva, right? So how you could translate without going through the commentary, right? So it's very rare occasions like such terms like Vanang Chindatama Rupang. So such case probably we have to use commentary. So I agree with the Professor where there is really necessary. So we have to concern. But in case of some other terms or terminology, or maybe it is not necessary, but in such cases, especially like when translating such stanza, Pancha Chinde Pancha Jahe. So if I simply translate, Pancha Chinde, cut off 5. So just that not exactly means, so such case we have to apply the commentary. So I agree with the Professor in such case. Of course we have to use the commentary.
Thank you, Ante. Thank you very much. I also agree with you. I think Venerable Brahmali would also like to contribute.
Yeah, my understanding is that we have already decided this at the first meeting, and that the idea is to, when we translate the Theravada, is that Theravada basically means to follow the commentarial interpretation. And that is not my understanding is also that is not a strict absolute requirement. But that if you do not want to follow the commentary, you actually have to make the case why you don't want to follow the commentary. If you can make a good case, my understanding is then it is acceptable not to follow it. But if it's going to be a Theravada work, which I understand this project is, then essentially it means that unless you have a good reason to follow the commentary, I don't know if our chairman would like to say something about that, but that's my understanding.
I agree that it's not necessary to check with the commentaries all the time. But in Thailand, when there is a variant in translation, we compare with the commentary and we follow commentaries. We take it as maybe authority. That is the tradition in our country as Theravada Buddhism. But from my experience of translation, it doesn't mean that we have to check with commentary every time. Only when there is controversy or sometimes if you do not agree with the interpretation of the commentary, you want to translate in another way. In that case, it is permissible, it is allowed to do that, but you have to put in the footnote why you have such diversion from the traditional translation or something like that. That is the way we do. I don't know. Commentary can be done when you want to explain or interpret to the reader. For example, in Dhammapada, Mano Pubbangama Dhamma Mano Setha Mano Maya. The commentary explain what the meaning of Mano here, Dhamma here. But sometimes if we put explanation by the commentary, it confuses the readers. Because the Dhamma here means Cetasika, mental factors or psychological factors. Mano Pubbangama Dhamma, Cetasika or mental factor follow Mano, that is Citta or consciousness. That is explanation in commentaries. But that is for scholastic understanding. But for the general reader, maybe that interpretation is not necessary. Even for the Thai people understanding, they do not want to interpret the Dhamma here as Cetasika. They mean everything to follow the mind, something like that. So I think it depends on the situation that sometimes it's quite difficult to understand. We have to interpret. For example, if we have to translate stanzas, Chataka, Chataka's verses, maybe it is too short to understand. That's why we have to put in footnote the explanation, interpretation of the commentaries. That happens when we translate the verses, the katha. I think it is necessary to look into the commentaries because katha or verses are very brief presentation and concise. When the English translation by Polytech Society present the translations of Kata, somehow at the beginning, maybe about at the beginning phase of translation, they just put their own theistic interpretation into translation in the maybe original translation. Then it is controversial. It was controversial because they didn't check with their commentaries that happened, and it criticized it in our tradition here. So if we want to make it accessible to the public, to the general reader, somehow it has not to be oversimplified and check with commentary, and not to bring in theistic interpretation into Buddhism. Then commentary would be helpful. That's my observation.
So, do I understand it correctly, Venerable, that means that as translators, we do not need to follow to keep reading the commentary all the time? Or
Not necessary. Not necessary.
Not necessary.
Not necessary at all. It doesn't mean that whatever you translate, it means you check with the commentaries every time. No, not that I mean.
Okay.
Yeah, if it is okay, acceptable, no controversy, and not the case that it is too short, too brief, too concise to understand.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Venerable. There was another issue, because I think we are almost at the end of the session, and that is also something that we have we reached an agreement, but it's an agreement that I think is subject to interpretation. That is the type of English, and we have been discussing a lot about Pali, but this is a Pali English translation, so there are two languages involved, and as far as I know, there is no native speaker of Pali here, but in the world there are native speakers of English and non-native speakers of English, among which I count myself. And of course, we don't have the same year. If we have an English year at all. So yesterday, when Professor Heim was talking about her translation, one of the methods that she uses, obviously, and that is something that is part of the policy of the collection in which she is translating, is that it has to sound rather more idiomatic than literal. But for instance, in my case, as a translator, I'm never sure of what is more idiomatic in English, what sounds good in English and what doesn't. I think that's probably very obvious when I talk. I'm not a native speaker. Many of us, we are not native speakers. So when we are translating, sometimes we tend to translate in a very literal way. I understood that in general, we don't expect a very literary translation. However, some of the members of our team, for instance, Venerable Brahmali, is very much in favor of translating in a way that makes sense to most of the readers, which obviously we are translating for the readers. That means that sometimes we are not going to be very literal. We are going to adapt the text and translate in a way that sounds good and sounds meaningful in English, but at the cost of being literal. So here again, what I have observed is that there are different views, and I'm not so sure what is the final policy that we have, like the final decision, if we have any in this group. So I would like to hear your opinions again. Thank you.
Thank you for raising this issue. Half of the international scholars here have joined our team in translating common Buddhist texts, CBT, that has been brought up by scholars, Harvard scholars here. When we start the project, we raise the same issue, the question that we are raising here. At the beginning, we we talk about presenting our work to the general readers. We even think about or propose that our common Buddhist texts, which are translation of the Buddha verse from Pali, Sanskrit, Chinese, and Tibetan into English, should be accessible to the public, ready to be distributed in hotels throughout the world. That is what we plan to do. And when even announced in advance, that is to the mass media, that what we are going to do. But in the process of translation, we have to balance between the scholar interpretation and presentation and the simplified version for the public, including language. What to do? Then in the process of working together, we come to the middle way, with the help of editorial board. We discuss, we select the terms, the common terms, the basic terms, and the outcome, the outcome of our work seems to be quite far from what we plan to do. That is to be accessible to anyone in the hotels, anyway. Our work seems to be very popular for the students, university students, to the scholars, to the practitioners, not to the general reader or the public. So this way, common Buddhist text has been accepted in the Buddhist community in the Vesak celebration and have been chosen to be translated into different from English, translated from English to about 10 languages now. Because of that background, the Thai government, the Supreme Sangha Council, approached me to do this translation work in the same manner. Although we want to make it simple to understand, but keep the track of Theravada tradition. The language can be the modern English, whatever, contemporary English, not King James English, or not 100 years ago, but the language accessible, understandable, but whatever terms that we are using, keeping our tradition. So it means the nuance of scholars' approach is there. We talked from the beginning that maybe our translation may be revised later on after finishing this project. We can maybe revise it using a simplified version or technique. That's fine. But take it this one to be the typical translation to be studied by students, by scholars around the world. And after this edition, we can have another version, another simplified edition, whatever, we can do it. But since this project is initiated by the Sangha of Thailand and the government, accuracy very important that I can convey to you. So if we sacrifice accuracy to simplicity, that is not maybe a case that is possible. So I think it is not easy to predict in advance what our work would be look like. But from experience that we have been working together, we will get to know what would be the middle part, the proper way to do it. Although you aim at another, maybe the level of difficulty of scholastic interpretation, whatever it is, or just for the general public. But after we work for some time, then I think with the help of computer network, we can adjust our procedure and get to be maybe that to the point that acceptable to all of us. It's quite I think it takes time, and that's why I think it is necessary to create a channel for communication. We have this way of communication that I have created the center at my temple for online meeting. So there will be a continuation of checking and doing things together. So I may not give you the definite answer, but that I try to explain my intention and my experience. That's all.
Thank you very much, Oscar Rahmatullah. I think with this, we will conclude this session, which has actually merged the two sessions, one session for discussion and a session for summary. I think we have already more or less summarized what is our situation at the moment. We have said that the use of the commentaries is not compulsory, but of course we can make good use of it and try to use it for solving problems. Also, in terms of the style of the translation, we will need to find a middle way that is not too literal to the point of being impossible to understand, but also not too literary and not too far away from the actual words of the Tipitaka. And also, we have already drafted a list on which basic glossary will be made, and that will be distributed and circulated shortly to all of you for your consideration and feedback. Initially, we were discussing about softwares. I think we haven't reached any conclusion on that, but it was great to hear your voices. I take note, and we will continue this discussion within the editorial committee or the editorial group, and we will keep you all posted. I think I'm not forgetting anything. Perhaps before the closing ceremony, we could take a break, because there was a break in the schedule that we haven't taken yet. But I will leave that to the MC of the...
Maybe we don't have
Thank you very much, everyone.
Rex, I think we don't need to break here, but what should we do further to compile the glossary? Do you like to request someone to join your teams so that you can bring out glossary of 100 terms and present to our meeting in the next meeting. What do you think will help you to do this task?
So far, I think one of the logistic problems is that we have many people doing the same thing. So one person passes the work to the other and the other to another. So at the end, we don't know what's going on. This is a problem we have so far. So to me, I think I will spend the same time whether I do it myself or I have someone else to do it and then I have to revise it. So I will take care of it. I will draft the glossary and then I will circulate it to everyone for your approval or for your feedback. Because the list has more or less already been agreed upon now, I don't think there will be many surprises that someone has forgotten about one of the novel truths and said, no, that one I don't have. I think basically we are all on the same page. And for the next steps, I'm not so sure because that will probably depend on the directors of the project. My understanding is that translators, especially international translators, are at the moment waiting for a contract that will stipulate and detail the pages, the volume and the pages that need to be translated. And if my understanding is correct, that's the only step that remains. And after that, everyone translates and we'll have to submit before the deadline, or maybe we can have an extension. But I'm not sure if I'm missing anything here. But I think that's our situation at the moment.
Only that, do you want to call upon another meeting of this kind, like the third session, or yesterday is the first one and today is the second one, and the continuation of discussion and to wind up what we have discussed so far, to summarize or whatever, even to look at the final proposal that you are going to give us. But what do you think?
If I give my honest opinion, Venerable, I don't think that we need more meetings. What we need is to translate. I think that many of the members of our team are waiting for the green light to start the work. And what I would do is to keep the conversation going by email.
Okay.
And also try to, perhaps that is more urgent, to organize a meeting for the editorial committee. But that is a separate issue that we can discuss later, perhaps privately. I think there are certain editorial decisions that need to be taken, and then we need to inform the members of the team. So for that, I do agree that perhaps we need to call for a meeting. But for the team of translators, and again, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand that you are all waiting for the green light, so that we agree on one basic glossary, and from this point you can begin your work. There is a contract that you will have signed, and then we will move from that point on the basis of work that has already been done. I think that is something necessary. Now we are talking theory, except perhaps for Venerable Mali, and obviously many of our translators have already worked on text, even on text that belong to their volumes, but still we haven't yet talked or discussed any translation or any piece of translation in this project. We are talking about the theory on how to begin, but we haven't seen any result of all this theory. So my understanding is that it is the time now to begin, if possible. And yeah, again, I don't know if there is any disagreement. Anyone would like to suggest something else, but that would be my personal opinion.
So I agree with you. Tactically, we have begun our work. Just wait for the legal matter, that is to sign contract, that is another matter. But I think we try to finalize the contract, signing contract by the end of this month. Actually, during Vesak, I want it to be final. But anyway, I request you, Alex, to be maybe in touch with our friends after this meeting for signing the contract, and it means that we have from today onward, we have started our project, launching the project after hearing our Minister of Culture. And we have learned a lot from discussion for the last 2 days. And I think the way that we are working together need the implementation. For example, someone talking about software. I would like you to decide among yourself what program to be used so that I can, because right now I set up the office, the center of the project, like a command center, so that we can keep in touch 24 hours if possible, and to have personnel working to communicate with you and others. But what is left is about computer software that we need. I hope that you discuss with Dr. Manirat and Ajahn Brahmali what would be the option that you like, and we will provide you to test, to try to use this program. So that is left to be done. Okay.
So thank you very much for the very productive and fruitful workshop on the translation and terminology consistency. On behalf of the organizers, my humble goes to the respected Sangha, distinguished scholars and distinguished guests to join us for today. Now it's time for us to rejoin again the closing ceremony of 17 Vesak Day at Escape Hall via Zoom and on-site. So แขกผู้มีเกียรติทุกท่านกรุณาเชิญกลับไปที่ห้อง Escape Hall นะคะจะมีพิธีปิดค่ะ Thank you very much for today and have a very nice evening. Thank you.